She moved to Atlanta recently, yeah. All right, folks, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, welcome to Torah Studies. This is our weekly exploration, our weekly spelunking. Said no one ever, of the Torah portion. Spelunking is cave exploring, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Well, in Torah, there are secret passageways. No, this may not be right. I just flipped it open. Don't take my page seriously. Okay, so the Torah portion is Yisro or Yitro, and you can find it in your Goodnick edition. In the classic Goodnick edition,
Page 458.
458, 459. Thank you. Boom. Okay. Yisro is famous for what? Father-in-law of Moses. Good. And the Torah portion is famous for? Ten Commandments. Famously, God tells Moses, it's not multiple choice. Okay. Or best out of 10. Here is the deal. Today's class is bananas in a good way. It is ridiculously amazing. Okay? So I'm just setting the bar. If we usually set the bar high, today's class is going to blow you away. Okay? In today's class, we're going to be looking at ancient biblical characters. We're going to be looking at history. We're going to be looking at linked characters throughout the generations. It's going to be wild. It's going to be woolly. I don't know what that means, because it's not actually going to be woolly, but it's going to be amazing. So I'm glad that you're here with me on this journey. Folks, buckle up. It's about to get cray-cray. Okay, so let's begin by addressing a simple point. Let's begin by passing around the copies of today's class. Here we go. Please take and pass. Please take and pass. All right. Good. So let's begin by talking about the following point. And this is a general point that the Rebbe pointed out so many times, and I want to raise it again tonight, and that is that the name of a thing in Judaism is really important. The name of a thing in Judaism is important. In general, the name of a thing in Hebrew is important. As it says in Kabbalah and Chassidut, it says that the name of a thing, of a living thing, represents its channel for its life, for its soul. I'm trying to remember who I told this to. No one present did I tell this to, so I want to share this with you. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was the wildest story. There are two brothers who are comedians. They're known as, their stage name is the Sklar Brothers. Their last name is Sklar. I don't know their first names, the Sklar Brothers. Anybody familiar with the name the Sklar Brothers? Okay. They're Jewish, from St. Louis. They're in their, I think, late 40s or 50s or whatever. So the mom tells the story on this podcast. They're twins. I should have mentioned. They're brothers, but they're actually twins. They're also twins, and they're brothers. It's amazing how that works. So the twins are born, and they are identical. Now, when I say identical, I mean not just like semi-identical or theoretically identical. I mean like identical. To the point that there's not one thing, one character trait, physical character trait, about one baby that the other one doesn't have. So there's not an extra birthmark or this or that or a toe or a finger or an ear, whatever. Everything is identical. Keshmai kenhu. Right? As the name indicates, so it was. Identical. The mom was very paranoid about mixing up the children. So what happens? So what does she do? She has like a double two levels of safety system. So one level is the outfit. She always dresses the one in, let's say, green and the other one in yellow. Always dresses that child in that color. And number two, the diaper, and this is before disposable diapers, she used different color pins for the diapers. Now, I have to confess, that's before my time. Actually, I don't know if it was before my time, but I don't remember how that, I didn't use it on my kids, let's put it that way.
We did.
But were there different color pins? This is legit? Okay, so she kept color-coded. She goes to the doctor a few weeks after the kids were born. I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it was. She goes to the doctor, pediatrician. And, Yeah, they take, so she decides, first formal visit, whatever, she's going to dress the kids in a nice outfit. So she got, from who knows who, she got matching outfits. Hold on. But her second layer was still there. The diaper pin. So they were wearing identical outfits. But the pins were different. She brings the kids to the pediatrician. The nurse takes the kids, brings back the kids, and says, Mrs. Sklara, we upgraded your children. No, that's not how she said. She says, we're trying something new. There's a new concept called disposable diapers. So we put the kids in disposable diapers, and here are your pins in a little bag. Are you with me on this? Her face, her heart, everything drops. She begins to freak out, like inside. Outside, she probably kept a calm exterior. Inside, she is beside herself. She has 2 children. She has no idea who is who.
What does it matter?
Hold on, one second.
It doesn't. If so.
Everything was identical. So hold on, let's get back to the point. So what happens, back to the story, she takes the kids home and she's panicking. She's like absolutely panicked. She puts them on the couch, she's looking at them, trying to get a read for who's who. And at some point, she consults her husband. She calls her husband in a panic. He's like, I just choose. So at some point, she just chooses. 50 years later or so, the children hear about the story. Like for years, they didn't know about the story, the Sklar brothers. They happen to be comedians, so it's like a funny podcast. They hear about the story, and they decide maybe there's a way to figure out who's who. So they look. My apologies. They look up to see if there's any sort of documentation that the mother might have missed, and indeed they find that there are hand and feet prints. Hand and footprints. They did in the hospital, and only one footprint from one of the kids, with the name obviously, was somewhat legible. They took it to like some sort of forensic footprint expert to try to see if they flew to like Vegas or something to see if they might be able to find a match. So they took the adult footprints and matched it up. They got a conclusive match. Anyway, so I mentioned the story and it turns out, so meanwhile, while they're waiting for the results, understand the confusion. So on one hand, the brothers are saying, does it really make a difference? Like, what if they find out that Tom, I don't know, I wish I knew the names, that Yankel is Shmuel and Shmuel is Yankel. Like, does it really make a difference? On the one hand, no. On the other hand, they've been using the wrong social security and the wrong name all these years. Have they been like defrauding the government? Is this is this a massive fraud situation? And are you looking up the Sklar brothers? What are their names? Randy and Jason. So if Randy is Jason and That was close. Shmuel and Yankel. Yeah, super like Randy and Jason, like very much equivalent. So, if Randy is Randy, Jason, great. But if Randy is Jason, Jason's Randy, so now like the kids are wondering like, so are you really my dad? It's like, obviously it's a joke, but like, so on the one hand, it means everything. On the other hand, it means nothing. Well, they found out that the mom got it right. That's the good, I know, right? And the mother she's also hilarious. 50-50. Sometimes, the toast lands with the butter side up. And she got it, but she kind of felt like that this emotion she had like an inclination, and it worked out. But really, the reason why I mentioned this is because on the one hand, names don't really mean much. Because what? Is this adult not this person because their original name was something else? You understand my question? Mm-hmm. Right? It still doesn't change who they are, but on the other hand, it's almost like their identity is not really their identity. So names are weird in that names represent identity, but they're not actually identity, but they're representative of like energy and identity and essence and all that stuff. So names are powerful, and yet names are not the thing itself, but just the name, and yet they reflect something. So the Rebbe would often say that any name that a Torah portion is named is significant. So if we have a Torah portion that is all about the Ten Commandments, which is kind of like the essence of Jewish law. And it's called Yisro, or Yitro, then you have to say that there's something about that guy that's connected with the entirety or the core of Torah, i.e. the Ten Commandments. It's not just by accident that he happened to be mentioned in the first verse, and so therefore we pegged him. Oh, Yisro is mentioned in the first verse. Done. That's going to be the name of the Torah portion, and so it is. If it's the name of the portion, it's essentially connected to the theme of the portion, i.e. the giving of the Torah. It's not in the Ten Commandments. Make sense so far? Yes?
Yisro was
the essence. It's the essence.
It's got to be the essence. And as the Rebbe said, when you title a book, when you give a book a title, or you give a chapter title, it's the core idea. It's not just random. Joy, what were we saying?
No, I was going to say that when he a Midianite priest, I mean, he wasn't technically a Jew.
Right. So the question is, Yisro should we call Moses? Moshe. Moshe does not have not one Torah portion named after him, and his father-in-law does, and it doesn't have to be because he does and he should. It's just an interesting thing. So we're going to address this question. This is the first question that I want to ask. Why is the portion called Yisro? Again, it's not just a random thing. It's not happenstance. It has to be significant. So in order to really understand this, we have to learn more about the life and times, the history, the trials, tribulations, the essence of Yisro, who he was, what he stood for, and what he means for us today. As we'll see today, Yisro, the man, Yisro, the legend, Yisro, the myth, not the myth, the man and the legend has a lot to teach us about life, about truth, about Torah, and we'll see why he gets the name, he gets the billing for this week's Torah portion about the Ten Commandments and Revelation at Sunday.
Rabbi, didn't he have to do with the legal system?
He helped tweak the legal system at the beginning of the Torah portion, but there still has to be something that is remarkable about him. Yeah, something big. We have to have something really, really big that earns him the name for the portion. So to understand this, look, let's put the Chumash aside for a second. We're going to go straight into the text, the Torah studies text. Again, we have a lot to get to. We're going to start off our inside study, in the Torah studies booklets. We're going to start off with a we're going to start off in an unusual place. The prophecy of the evil prophet Balaam, or Bilam in Hebrew, Balaam. As you might recall in the book of Numbers, which is the fourth book of the Torah tells us how the Jews are approaching. This is 40 years after the Exodus. Torah tells us how the Jews were approaching the Holy Land and how the nations on the journey of the Jews were getting nervous, were getting anxious that the Jews might come and who knows what. Even though the Jews weren't planning on waging a war with any of those nations, but some of those nations were concerned, including the nations of Amalek we have, but nations of Moab and Midian, etc. So they hire Balaam. Who's Balaam? Balaam is the evil prophet. Or Balaam is a prophet for profit. So he's a prophet, but he's out to make a buck. So he's like a mercenary. He's a spiritual mercenary where he goes and curses for money in order to take down individuals or nations. Of course, famously, we know that Balaam tries 3 times to curse the Jewish people and is unsuccessful each time. And instead of cursing, he blesses. So in text 1, we have one of the turns of phrase of blessing that Balaam expresses about the Jewish people. Text number 1. David, please get us started, page 63, where it says, he saw Amalek.
He saw Amalek and took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, and his fate will be everlasting destruction. His fate, will be everlasting destruction. He saw the Canaanite, the descendants of Yisro, and took up his parable and said, how firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in a cliff.
Thank you. So Balaam's prophecies and blessings are very esoteric. He's on top of a mountain, and he's trying to look down and curse the Jewish people, God forbid, but he's looking around at the other nations, east, northeast, southwest, and the Torah says he looks toward the direction of Amalek, and he says Amalek was the first, but they'll be destroyed. He looks at the Canaanites and he says, how firm is your dwelling place? Your nest is set in a cliff. Okay, again, esoterically, what does it actually mean? Okay, let's take a look at the Midrash. This is text number 2. Dan, please read text number 2. This is page 64. And here the Midrash explains Balaam's message to the Canaanites.
This is analogous to a bird hunter who trapped one bird, but the second bird fled and settled on the king's statue. The hunter stood before the statue in a dilemma. He said to the bird, "If I poked you with a stone, I might receive the death sentence. If I pierce you with my spear, I might impale his majesty's likeness. What can I say? You have escaped and found a safe haven." Similarly, Balaam examined Amalek and cursed him with destruction. He then examined Yisro and found that he had repented. He said to him, "You have found a safe haven. May your dwelling place be as firm as Abraham's."
You with me on this? Yes? Thank you. What does the Midrash say? Balaam looks at Amalek and he curses Amalek. He says, Amalek, you might have been the first to start up with the Jews, but you should know that although you might be strong and mighty, your fate will be everlasting destruction. You will be destroyed at the end. Then he looks at the Canaanites. Who are the Canaanites? The Canaanites were the descendants of Yisro. And he says, you know what? Your fate originally was also going to be of destruction, but you repented, you found a safe haven, and now your dwelling place may it be as firm as Abraham's. In other words, that's what he says to the Canaanites. He says, how firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in a cliff, i.e. it's protected. And again, the Midrash gives the example of the bird. So the fellow is trying to hunt birds, and one bird goes in the statue of the king, and now he can't touch the bird. The bird is untouchable. So too, Yisro fled, if you will, to the king's statue, and now he's untouchable. Make sense? Ish? Sort of? What this Midrash is alluding to is the fact that Yisro, and we're going to explore his life and times in a moment in depth, Yisro was formerly an idolater. He was an Oved Avodah Zarah. He was not a monotheist. And eventually, ultimately, he abandoned those ways and joined the Jewish people. And the beginning of this week's Torah portion is where he joins the Jewish people. And according to all of the commentaries on Torah, he not only met up with Moshe and the rest of the crew, the Jew crew, in the desert, but he actually converted to Judaism at this moment. He converts to Judaism right here at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. So, what Balaam says is, he looks at Amalek and he says, Amalek, you're going to be destroyed, but Yisro, you saved yourself. You joined up with the Jewish people, with Abraham's children, and now you're in good terms.
What did Amalek do that was wrong?
Amalek, at the end of last week's Torah portion, Amalek wages war with the Jewish people. The Jewish people, let's just do a very quick history. So, of course, 2 weeks ago, we read about the Exodus from Egypt. Last week, we read about the splitting of the sea, and the Jews complaining about water and food, and the manna that fell down from heaven. At the end of the Torah portion of last week's Torah portion, right before we're introduced to Yisro here, meeting with the Jewish people in the desert, the last thing we read last week in the Torah was the war of Amalek, the battle of Amalek against the Jewish people. The Jewish people had just gone out of Egypt, and Amalek attacks, and so that's why they're the first. They're the first of the nations.
He attacks from the rear.
No.
And he attacks women and children.
Correct. Right. He attacks the vulnerable.
The vulnerable ones.
Vulnerable. Yeah, he tries to attack the vulnerable, and the Jews have to wage war. And so Balaam, again, this is later on, this is 40 years later, Balaam is speaking in prophetic terms, and he says, Amalek, you might have been the first of the nation to start up with the Jews, but you should know your end is going to be destruction. And then he turns to look at Yisro's descendants, and he says, you know what? You guys are in a good place. Why? Because Yisro went and joined the Jewish people. Okay, so that's...
The language is so beautiful. Vaizanev otcha, he tailed you,
Oh, you're saying about Amalek. Yeah, Vazanav, right. Okay, so I want to ask a bunch of questions on everything that we've learned until now, or primarily really texts 1 and 2. Number one, why was Balaam, why did he care about Yisro? What was his thing with Yisro? He's talking about Amalek, big nations. Why is he mentioning Yisro? Yisro wasn't the father of a great nation. Maybe he had some kids, he had some daughters, we know, and I'm sure they had kids. But what's the deal? Why make a whole mention about Yisro? Yeah?
Didn't he work together with, wasn't Pharaoh, I think they were.
Who?
Yeah,
Yisro himself.
Yisro
himself was one of the advisors. But again,
And Balaam was not.
Balaam was one of the advisors as well. Yeah, but before we get there, the question is, look, he's looking around. Balaam is on top of the mountain, looking at these big, great nations. He talks about Amalek, and then he talks about the Canaanites, descends from Yisro. He talks about Yisro joining with the Jewish people. Where does it come in? In other words, what's the connection between Yisro's destiny and Amalek's destiny in the language of, in the prophecy of Balaam? And really, what is the connection between Amalek and Yisro?
Maybe he took, it was Moses' father-in-law, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the key.
These were the Canaanites, though. It wasn't Moses'
He
family.
repented.
Who repented? You're saying
Yitro.
Yitro repented, correct. But again, the question is, why is Balaam talking about Yitro and his descendants and repentance? If he's looking at the nations that are the enemies of the Jews, why is he even mentioning Yitro? Look, it's the answer will be stronger than the question. We're going somewhere with the question. It's kind of a leading question, but that's the way we're gonna jump into it.
Yisro is seeing, I guess you could say he's seeing the light, and Balaam would not want others to
Okay,
take
good.
that approach.
Good, I like that. Now, and the last question, the last thing I want to point out is that Balaam, according to the Midrash in text 2, Balaam says, Yitro, you were in trouble, but then you found a safe haven. May your dwelling place be as firm as Abraham's. Why is he comparing or juxtaposing Yitro and Avram and Abraham? So again, we have really primarily two questions. What's the juxtaposition between Amalek and Yitro, and what's the juxtaposition between Yitro and Abraham and Avram Avinu? What's the connection both ways?
Abraham was the first to really not only recognize Hashem, but to go out and teach people.
Okay.
Yisro we consider as the first real convert.
Good. So the basic answer would be, or the straightforward answer would be, that Yitro is the first documented convert post-Exodus that we have in Torah, and it says that every person who converts is considered to be the child of Avram and Sarah, Abraham and Sarah. So there you go. When Yitro converts to Judaism, he's found a safe haven. His dwelling place may be as firm as Abraham's, i.e., he's a child of Avram and Sarah.
But that kind of doesn't jive with text 3. And
Hold on, wait, we're not to text 3. One second. Hold on. We haven't introduced it yet. So now the question is, now I'm going to introduce it. So now the question that we can ask is, was Yitro, though, really a sincere convert? Why do I ask that? Because we'll see in text 3, Maimonides says the qualifications of sincere conversion, and please read this text number 365.
When a prospective convert applies for conversion, we examine their motives. Perhaps they seek financial gain or a position of authority, or are driven by fear.
So Rambam says, Maimonides says, we have to be careful. Someone converts to Judaism, it has to be for the right reasons, right? Converting to Judaism means that they're into Judaism and not any side benefits or other things that might be involved. So, if it's about financial gain, no good. If it's at a position of authority, no. If it's driven by fear of not converting or whatever, also no. So it has to be purely motivated by a desire to follow Torah and mitzvot.
so that's a key differentiation that lives to this day, because you can go to church on Sunday and I believe, you know what I mean? It's just they want people to say they convert whether they mean it or not, but it takes a whole full work process.
It's a little bit more involved.
To this day.
Yeah, 100%. It's more involved in Judaism. There's another difference, that Judaism doesn't encourage necessarily conversions, because it doesn't say that the only way to be a good person is by being Jewish. Whereas other religions say the only ticket, the only way you're going to have, good life or salvation or whatever, heaven, is if you're this religion or that religion. Whereas Judaism doesn't say that. And again, it's got to be about Torah mitzvahs. Like if somebody wants to live a Jewish life, great, then that's grounds for conversion. If it's because of any other side benefits, then that's not a valid reason according to halacha, as Rambam articulates in text 3. Where are we going with this? One could ask the question, was Yitro really a sincere convert? Why do I ask that? Because look, he's motivated here by what? Exodus. What happens? The Jewish people leave Egypt, and they have the miracle of the splitting of the sea, and they're riding high. They're like the greatest nation on earth, right? Not the greatest show on earth. That's Barnum, Ringling Brothers, Barnum Bailey Circus, right? But the greatest nation on earth at this time is the Jewish people. And so maybe he wants to convert, not because he's dedicated to Torah mitzvah, but because it's trendy. He's going to have fame and prestige. It's going to be a good thing for him to join the Jews while they're hot. So how do we know it was sincere?
But he also saw how they were saved from Amalek, and that had impressed him.
Great, but all of these are side reasons. These are not the right reasons. If it's because he's
all the different deities and knew that they weren't real.
So hold on 1 second. Again, as we stand here in the historical context, it seems like he's converting now at this point, right? Torah portion of Yitro is after the Exodus, after the splitting of the sea, after the defeat of Amalek. Yeah, so he wants to become Jewish. Of course he does. That was easy, right? So in order to understand why he was sincere, we're not actually calling his conversion into question, really. I'm just asking the question in order to support and to really demonstrate how we know he was absolutely sincere. In order to do this, we have to look at a little bit more of the biography of Yisro, who he was, and how he got to where he got to. So, to understand this, let's first preface something that was mentioned earlier, and we've mentioned in previous classes in Torah studies, and that is that Yitro began his public career, at least the history that we know of, as one of the three primary advisors of Pharaoh. Where do we see this? The Talmud says this clearly, the Midrash says this, text number 4. Steve, take it away, page 65.
Rabbi Ida, the son of Abba, said in the name of Rabbi Shammai, 3 were consulted, Balaam, Job, and Yitro.
When Pharaoh had the Jewish problem, too many Jews in his mind, right? Okay, so he consulted with his 3 chief advisors. One was Balaam, the aforementioned evil prophet. One was Job, the great sufferer in Scripture, Eov. And the third was Yitro. What happens? So Pharaoh asked the question, what do we do about the Jews? Famously, Job says nothing. Job says whatever you want to do. He has no opinion. Balaam says, what does Balaam say? Nope. This is earlier. What does Balaam say? Balaam's advice is taken. What does Balaam say? Throw the boys into the Nile River, right? So Job says nothing. Balaam says throw him to the Nile River. And what does Yitro say? Text number 5. Burton.
Yitro, the Midianite, replied to the king, if the king finds my advice favorable, do not harm them, because their God chose them from time immemorial and has selected them from among all the nations to be his heir.
So according to the Midrash, Yitro, who's known sometimes as Ru'el, he had a few names, aliases. So he tells the king, he tells Pharaoh, don't harm the Jewish people because they are chosen by God. Does Pharaoh take his advice? No. What happens instead? Pharaoh now wants to kill Yisro. Why does he want to kill him? He wants to kill him because he's very upset. Very upset. How dare you say that I shouldn't negatively harm, the Jewish slaves. So he flies into a rage, and he wants to kill Yisro, and Yisro is forced to run away for his life, and he runs to a place called Midjan. Now, in Midjan, what happens is he becomes a respected leader and he becomes a priest. He becomes a priest, an idolatrous priest, a pagan priest. Very well respected. How do we know this? Text number 6, the Mechilta says. Doreen.
It was said that there wasn't an idol in the entire world that Yisro did not worship.
He was an expert. Yeah, he was the Wikipedia of idolatry. He knew everything. He tried it all out. He was the expert. So he goes to Midjan from Egypt, and he is the guru. In fact, according to some traditions, he became a king in Midjan. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do we reconcile this with the story that happens later? Because the Torah tells us what happens when Moses runs away to Midjan. It seems like Midjan was the place to run away from Egypt, right? Mm-hmm. So Moses kills the Egyptian. He runs away to Midjan. And who does he meet in Midjan? And what's going on with Yisro's daughters? What's going on with them?
Well, they're at the well, and these guys are basically picking on him, and Moses defends
So here's the question. If Yitro was a respected individual, if he was a king, or a priest, or a wise man, or an oracle, or whatever you want to call him, yeah? So how are his daughters being picked on? You with me?
Yeah.
Again, the narrative as you put all the pieces together from Jewish sources, here's the picture. Yitro was an advisor to Pharaoh. He gave the wrong advice, according to Pharaoh. He gave advice to spare the Jewish people. Pharaoh didn't like it. He runs away to Midjan. He's a respected spiritual leader. But at some later point, when Moses goes to Midjan, at that point already, Yitro's daughters are being picked on. So what's going on with that? Why isn't he untouchable? Now, where do we see this? Let's just lay out the story. Text 7a. Donna, please read text 7a, page 67.
Now the chief of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs to water their father's flocks. But the shepherds came and drove them away. So Moses arose and rescued them and watered their flocks.
And of course, the rest is history. Moses and Zipporah, one of the daughters of Yisro, the oldest daughter of Yisro, they fall in love and they get married and happily ever after. Fine. But again, what do we see here? That the shepherds are harassing the daughters of Yisro. And I'll ask you another question. Why were his daughters shepherdesses?
Well, I mean, if he were a king or anybody of rank socially, they would have had slaves or servants or whatever to do that.
His 7 daughters are going schlepping to give water to the animals, going to the well.
That would imply that they were of a lower socioeconomic.
Yeah, so something had to have happened. Well, guess what? We have the answer, text 7b. Donna, please read text 7b as well, page 68.
Yisro was a pagan priest. When he realized that idol worship is without substance, he reneged and repented before Moses arrived. He summoned his fellow citizens and proclaimed, I served you until now, but I have grown old. Select for yourself a new priest. He then removed all his idols and gave them to the people of the city. They ostracized him and declared that no man should help him, work for him, or shepherd his flock. He begged the shepherds to shepherd his flock, but they refused. He therefore charged his daughters with the task.
So I'll ask you to continue in a moment, but you see what happens?
Where does this come from?
Text 7, look at the source.
Midrash.
Midrash.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a very important biographical piece of Yisro's life. It's a very important piece, right? I think many of us are familiar with the fact that Yitro was an advisor to the Pharaoh, and that he went to Midjan and he was a priest there. But somehow this piece, this very important piece, may not be in everyone's mind about how he fell from grace in the eyes of the people. He becomes a
Pariah.
Outcast.
an outcast. Is what I was looking for. An outcast. I was thinking like Castaway, but no, an outcast. Right, it's the wrong island.
So was he an Egyptian originally, or who?
I don't know.
You know? Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'm not sure where he comes originally. He definitely spent a good amount of time there as a respected advisor.
My question really is, was he a Midianite who then went to Egypt
And then back,
and
right.
then went back when things went south?
It may say somewhere, I don't know offhand. I don't know without the research. But here we have a clear source, a clear midrashic source that explains what happens, how he falls from grace due to his own choosing and breaking away from idolatry and paganism. Continue one more paragraph, please.
And they came and drew water. This teaches us that the daughters would arrive early in the morning because they feared the shepherds. But the shepherds came and drove them away. Why would the shepherds drive away the daughters of Midian's prince? This teaches us that they ostracized him and expelled his daughters.
It should really Midian's priest, I think, instead of prince.
Priest.
I think. It says prince here, but it might have been might be a typo because I think we're talking about priest. Anyway, again, the Midrash is reiterating why everything is explained when you have this piece of information. In other words, he was a respected individual in Midian. He was a spiritual leader. He was, looked up at by many, by everyone, and then he disavows the idols. He disavows the gods that they worshipped, and he gave away all of his merch, all of his stuff. And they ostracize him. Not only do they ostracize him, they ostracize the whole family, the whole mishpacha. They're all pariahs. And what happens? Now the shepherds are harassing the daughters of Yisro. You wonder, otherwise, without this midrash, you wonder, even if you don't put all the pieces together and then have the obvious question of why are Yisro's daughters schlepping for water if he's a respected leader? Even if you don't have that piece of information, you wonder, why were they harassing them in the first place? What, were they just having fun? Like, why was this a thing? Is this reflective of the way society treated shepherdesses? Maybe that's what you might think, otherwise, and maybe that was still true otherwise. But here we have a clear indication of what was going on. What was going on is,
It doesn't say that he gave up the idols because he started to believe in something else. It just says that he was old and he wanted just to retire.
Right. That's what he told the people. He told the people, I'm old, I want to retire. But look what it says over here. It says when he realized that idol worship is without substance in the Hebrew, V'ra'a she'ein bo mamash. He saw that it's the whole Baba Mises. So he gave it up. He told the people, I'm giving it up because I want to retire, but they saw through it. If it was really a retirement, they wouldn't have ostracized him, but they saw right through it. And he gave away his idols, right. So it was clearly indicated that he had gone the other direction. They didn't like it. They ostracized him and his family and his daughters. And that's why Moshe has to come to the rescue. Moses comes to the rescue and helps the daughters, marries Zipporah, and the rest is history. What's the rest? The rest is that Moshe becomes the shepherd of the family, of the mishpacha. And then one day, God appears to him at the burning bush, and then gives him the call to go to Egypt, and he's involved with the Exodus and splitting the sea, and the war against Amalek, and now we're back to where we started. But now we also have an answer to the question that we asked before, which is we called Yisro's conversion into question because we said, Johnny come lately, of course he converted because the Jews are riding high. But what do we see now? He had already given up pagan worship decades
before he came and joined Moses.
Correct. Yes. You understand what we just did? Yeah. We questioned before, again, it wasn't like a strong question, but we threw some allegations out there that maybe Yisro's conversion was not so pure. Right? Why wasn't it pure? Because he converted after the Exodus, after the splitting of the sea, after the victory against Amalek. Now he joins. Yeah, of course he joined. Right? Easy to join the Jewish people now. So who says he's sincere? So we have an answer. He already had left idolatry years prior to this on his own.
And was paying the price for it.
And he paid the price. Oh, that's an important point.
Why didn't he stay with them?
Why didn't he? According to some, he did.
Some say.
Not sensei. Some say. Some say this, some say that. And even if he didn't stay with them, it doesn't mean he gave up his newly declared beliefs. But again, I know I said this already twice. One more time, he abandoned idolatry before he ever met Moses. Before Moses arrives on the scene to rescue his daughters at the wells, or at the well for the shepherd for the flock. Before that, he had already given up idolatry. Yeah.
So, people that are born Jewish, regardless whatever they observe or not, they're Jewish. So, as I mentioned before, how much work someone has to do to convert.
Right.
So, and then once they are officially Jewish, and if they don't do any of the mitzvahs or anything like that, then is it the same as a
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. It's a good question. We'd have to consult with somebody who's involved in conversions. I'm not directly involved in conversions, but it's a question. It's a question that the Bet Din thinks about, and they typically won't do a conversion unless somebody is living in a community where they can, well, not even monitor, where they can at least have a little bit more assurance that they're in a community and they're likely to keep on the same path. But you're right. What stops someone from moving out or whatever? Who knows, right? It's so I can't, I don't know that I can comment any further than that. But I hear what you're saying. It's something that's thought about. What does it mean? What does it do? I don't know. It's a good question. Now, but getting back to our story, so we've asked a bunch of questions. We spoke about the prophecy of Balaam, and where he connects Amalek and Yisro and Avram, and we had questions about that, but we left it off to the side. We explained that the connection between Yisro and Avram could be because Yisro converted, and everyone who converts is considered to be a child of Abraham, of Avram. We then asked the question, well, was it really sincere? And we've demonstrated through classic Jewish Talmudic and Midrashic sources that absolutely it was sincere, and even though it only manifested in a final way after the Exodus and the splitting of the sea and the victory against Amalek, that train had started years earlier when he abandoned idolatrous practice. Correct? One second, before you ask that. However, still the question is, why didn't he convert earlier? If Yisro had really seen the light before, right? If he had seen the light before, so why didn't he convert? Maybe, I don't know, this was fairly quick after the Exodus. Maybe when he met Moses. Maybe when if he was really sincere, then maybe even during the Egyptian slavery. Why not? If he really believes if he really feels that pagan worship was false and monotheism is the way, okay, so then why not join earlier? So our sages address this. This is text number 8. Troy, we up to you? Yeah, text number 8.
And Yisro heard. What did Yisro hear that made him come to the Jews? He heard about the war against Amalek, and he came.
So listen to this. This is the Mechilta. Mechilta says, what was the news that got him actually to do it, to make it happen? Again, the train was already heading to that direction. But what made him get up and do it? It was the war against Amalek and the victory against Amalek. This is very important. Because remember how we started the class? With asking the question, why does Balaam compare the two nations? When he's up on the mountaintop, he looks first at Amalek, and then he talks about the Canaanites, who are the descendants of Yisro, and I ask the question, what does one have to do with the other? Guess what? Here we have another reference of that connection. That it's only once the war against Amalek happens, and after that Yitro comes to join the Jewish people formally. There's something about Amalek and Yitro, there's a bond, there's a connection there that runs deep. It runs deep in Yitro's lifetime, and it runs deep later on. I don't know if he's still alive, but later on, 40 years later, when Balaam is trying to curse the Jewish people, and he mentions the nation of Amalek, and then he mentions the descendants of Yitro, in the same breath practically, there's some connection between these two dynasties. And as we'll see, what Amalek represents and what Yitro represents are polar opposites. They each represent something that is diametrically opposed. To understand this, we need to understand a little bit more about Amalek. Who was Amalek? I hope this class, I told you, it's a wild class, but the structure of this class is there's a lot of threads. We're dropping a lot of threads. I hope everyone is following the threads more or less.
We haven't gotten to the subject line yet.
Which
the
is
right
what?
Reason for acting right.
No, we're not going to get there till the end. Don't worry. We still have time for that. That's not to the very end. At the very end, we're going to get to that point. Yeah. But again, we're dropping threads. Hopefully, I don't want to lose anybody along the way. Just to recap, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. We started off by talking about how this Torah portion is called Yisro. It's named after him. It has the 10 Commandments. There must be something special about this individual. Done. That's thread number 1. Thread number 2. Balaam gets up on the mountain, and he's looking to curse. He ends up blessing. And he ends up cursing the enemies of the Jews. He looks at Amalek and curses them. He looks at the Canaanites and he blesses them. And the Midrash says, what's going on? Amalek is bad, curses them. The Canaanites are Yisro's family. So he says, you know what? You got lucky. Yisro's a good guy. He's with Abraham. Then we asked, how's he with Abraham? We answered because he converted. We asked, was it sincere? And we answered, yes. Then we asked, why did he wait so long then if he was sincere? If he had discovered monotheism prior? And the answer is he's waiting for Amalek. And the question is, who's Amalek? Yes? So why did it take 45 minutes? We don't know. But that's what we've done until now. Yes, makes sense? Hope everyone's on the same page. So who was Amalek? 9a.
Remember what Amalek did to you on your way out of Egypt. He cooled you off on the way and cut off all the stragglers at your rear when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God.
All the stragglers at the rear he cut off. That's Amalek. Yeah, you mentioned before. Amalek goes Vayizanev. Vayizanev. Like the tail. Okay. But what does it mean he cools you off? Asher karcha baderach, which karcha baderach can also mean literally cut you off on the way. But karcha is also kar. What does kar mean? Cold. Ma'od kar. Not it's like a lot of car for the price. No. It's kar is cold. So what does it mean he cools you off? The Midrash says, continue please.
He cooled you off before others. Rabbi Kunya said this is analogous to a bathtub filled with boiling water into which no living creature could descend. Along came one irresponsible man and he jumped headlong into it. Although he scolded himself, he made others think that it was cooler than it really was. Similarly, when the Jewish people emerged from Egypt and the sea split for them, and the Egyptians drowned in it, the nations feared them. Once Amalek came and engaged them, though he received his due, he pulled them off before the nations of the world.
So there's a scary bathtub, it's too hot. No, everyone's afraid, but one Meshugana jumps in. Suddenly everyone's like, yeah, I can probably also do it. And it loses its allure, or the fear. Same thing, the Jews had been riding the greatest heights. Everyone was afraid of the Jews. No one wanted to start up. You have one person who starts up, and now, fair game. That's Amalek. That's what it means, karcha baderach. So here's the point. Who is Amalek? Amalek is the one who is so dedicated to evil, to doing something wrong, that they do something wrong even to their own detriment. They don't mind getting burned, right? As long as they're doing what they need to be doing. In other words, they're so dedicated to negativity that they're going to do it even to their own personal detriment. You'd think that a person is doing something wrong because at least it feels good. Here they're doing something wrong even though it doesn't feel good, right? That's how dedicated they are to the craft of taking down the Jews. To understand where this comes from, we're going to go back to Chazan Ben's favorite topic, Yaakov and Esav.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes. Yaakov and Esav. Take a look at what the Zohar says, text 10. You're going to love this. Zohar is the primary work of Kabbalah. Look what it says about the twins. Speaking of twins, Sklar brothers, right? Twins, Yaakov and Esav. Take it away.
Rabbi Shimon said, the verse states, and God created the great serpents. What is the inner meaning of the verse? It refers to Jacob and Esau.
Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau, in the Zohar are called Taninim Hagadolim, the great serpents. Now the question is, that doesn't sound so complimentary. What does that mean? Why are they called great serpents? That doesn't sound so nice. Now you want to call Esav a serpent? Okay, I've seen texts that call, Jewish texts that call Esav worse things. But now you're calling Yaakov a serpent. That doesn't sound nice. Both of them are serpents. Taninim Hagadolim, plural. There were great serpents. Who are those serpents, plural? Yaakov and Esav and Yaakov. Doesn't sound nice. Calling Zayda Yaakov, Grandpa Jake, we're calling him a serpent? In the Zohar and Kabbalah? Doesn't sound nice. So take a look at what the Shemi Shmuel says. This is an unbelievable interpretation. Look at this. This is a Chassidic text number 11. Lillian, are you up to reading? Text 11, Esau.
Esau and Jacob are analogous to snakes. Jacob was repulsed by falsehood and evil, not just because they stand in contrast to truth and goodness, and thus interfere with his chosen path, rather simply because they are evil. Even if something evil could be found that would not interfere with Jacob's path, he would still be unable to tolerate it. Esau was the very opposite. His hatred for all things true and good was intrinsic, not because it opposed his chosen path of evil.
Let me explain this. According to the Talmud, snakes are unique. Most animals, dangerous predators or animals, whatever, they attack when they feel threatened. The snake is different. Again, I'm not a zoologist or whatever it's called, so I'm not a snakeologist, so I can't confirm this. Who? There's really a word for this?
Yes.
What?
Herpetology.
Herpetology?
Yes.
Gesundheit. Fine. I'm not a herpetologist, nor am I a hippopotamus. Anyway, there's a kid's song. I'm a hippopotamus from my top to my bottoms. Anyway, it's a complicated story about how the origins of that song. Getting back to the point. So I'm not an expert on snakes, but the Talmud says that snakes are unique in that they will attack for the sake of attacking. They will not only attack when they're frightened, they will attack aggressively. Some will. Other animals, the Talmud says, are pretty much more, if they feel threatened, they'll attack. A snake will go out of its way. Why? Not to protect itself, just because. In other words, it's dedicated to the craft. What am I doing? I'm attacking. That's what I'm doing. Why? Doesn't matter, I'm attacking. It's kind of like an irrational thing. It's not like I'm afraid, therefore I'm going to attack to protect myself. There's no reason. It's pure, baseless, just pure attack.
That's what I do, I'm a snake.
It's what I do. So it comes along the Shem Shmuel, the Chassidic text that we just read, text 11. He says, now we understand what the Zohar, what Kabbalah says about Yaakov and Esav, why they're both called snakes. Because they were both dedicated to their paths irrationally. Esav is dedicated to evil irrationally, even to his own detriment. Doesn't matter, dedicated to the craft. And Yaakov is dedicated to truth, justice, and the Jewish way, also irrationally. It doesn't make a difference, dedicated to the craft. All right, hold on. I know. I told you that you love this topic. I know what I mean when I said that. But look, this is the way we're understanding it. That Esav and Yaakov, they were twins. They shared a lot in common. Although they pointed in different directions, they were both snake-like in that it doesn't matter. It wasn't about what's in it for me or whatever. This is what I do. The snake is attacking not because I need to or I have to protect this or that or the other. The snake is attacking because it's attacking. Esav was dedicated to evil because it's evil. That's it. And Yaakov was dedicated to Torah and goodness because it's Torah and goodness, not for any other agenda. Which means that who is Amalek and who does it take after? Well, Amalek we know is the grandson of Esav. And it fits. He takes after the Zaydah. The apple doesn't fall from the tree. It doesn't fall far from the tree. I may have said that right or wrong the first or second time. Huh? Fits with the snake. Oh, and this, right? Exactly. So here's the deal. Get ready for this. Amalek attacks the Jews. They don't live in the area. They're not like on the road out of Egypt. The Jews weren't about to encounter the Amalekites. Amalek was all the way up north. Amalek makes a trip. Greyhound bus. They book tickets. Yeah, they're like, we heard the Jews are having fun, are gaining traction. Not on our watch. We're going in, dude. You have nothing to. You're not being threatened. They're not attacking you. They're not near you. Like no one's touching you. They can't let it be.
But why were the Jews picked to be the?
Well, remember, his grandfather was Esav. They came from Esav, and Esav and Yaakov weren't always in the best of terms. But again, understood on this cosmic level of light, darkness, good, evil, the way we're positioning it now is that Esav represents the forces of evil, the irrational force of evil. Jacob represents the irrational force of good. And so when the irrational force of evil sees good gaining steam, it says, I got to take you down. Even though it's not threatening the evil in its own place. The evil is still fine in its own place. It's not yet.
So it's multiple reasons.
It's attacking because that's what it does. It's the snake. And Yaakov conversely attacks because, Yaakov conversely is the snake for the side of goodness, again, irrationally. So, let's take a look at, let's advance this idea. No, before we advance this idea. Before we read text 12, let's advance it outside and then we're going to read it. It's an unbelievable idea. Turns out Amalek is the heir of Esau, which is an irrational dedication to evil. Amalek therefore attacks irrationally. Amalek got defeated. Doesn't matter. Amalek got scalded in the hot bathtub. Doesn't matter. We're going to take down the allure, the mystique, right? The special, aura around the Jewish people. We're taking them down. They're not bothering you. We're taking them down. That's like, I'm attacking because I'm attacking. That's what I do. And what about Yisro? Yisro was a guy who gave up everything. His fame, his position, his covet, his honor, everything he gave up and renounced paganism, idolatry. And he professed, he adopted monotheism. He represents a dedication to truth even to his own detriment. Amalek represents a dedication to evil at his detriment. Yeah? You with me? He burns himself in the water, but he's dedicated to evil. And Yisro represents, the opposite represents a dedication to truth and to Torah, before Torah, but dedication to truth and Hashem, even to his own detriment. He loses his honor, his family gets ostracized, his daughters get harassed, he loses everything. And guess what? There was nothing in it for him. He had nothing else at that point. He didn't know what the name was of the truth that he sought. He just knew that this wasn't true. And he gave it up because he knew it wasn't true, even though it would cost him. Amalek is dedicated to evil, even if it's going to cost him. And Yisro is dedicated to goodness, to truth, and to Hashem. He doesn't even know what that means at this point, even though it's going to cost him. You with me on the contrast? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, if we look at Amalek and Yisro, where do they come from? Esav and Yaakov. Yes? You with me on this? Mm-hmm. Esav and Yaakov, single-minded dedication to one side or the other, evil or good. And down, historically, moving downward, Amalek is dedicated to causing trouble, even to his own detriment, to their own detriment. And Yisro is finding God or renouncing falsehood, even to his own detriment. Yes? Yes? Now we understand. No. Text 12. Let's read. Let's do text 12. Ray, are you up to reading text 12, page 73?
Yeah.
It turns out.
It turns out that Yitro was like Jacob in this regard. Yitro had been among Pharaoh's advisors and had common cause with Amalek. He was a pagan priest, but once he recognized that paganism is without substance, he recanted and repented. This was before Moses arrived at Midian. The people rose up and ostracized him so that no one would engage with him, work for him, or shepherd his sheep. He therefore sent his daughters to shepherd the sheep. This all occurred before he made Moses' acquaintance, which means that it was before he discovered Judaism and holiness. Nevertheless, he accepted the consequence of ostracism, which is difficult for a respected person.
Please continue one more paragraph.
This leads to the inescapable conclusion that Yitro was intrinsically repulsed by evil and falsehood. It could not have been because it interfered with his chosen path of truth and goodness, since he had yet to learn the true path. This is the antithesis of Amalek. Amalek intrinsically hated good, whereas Yitro intrinsically hated evil.
You with me on this? Yeah. So now we have this duality, this divide between Yaakov and Esav represented in Yitro and Amalek. Amalek chooses to fight the Jews even though he's getting burned. And Yitro chooses to go against polytheism and paganism even though he's getting burned. I love what he says. It's not like it interfered with his path. He didn't have a path. He just knew that this wasn't the path. And that was enough for him to renounce it. It would have been easier for him, if he would have given up this path for another path. He would have said, not this path, but I have another path. And he would have joined that team. He didn't have a team. He just knew this wasn't right. Didn't feel right. Didn't taste right. Didn't smell right. Nothing was right about it. He lets it go at his own detriment. So now we understand why, on a deeper sense, why Yitro is connected with Abraham. Not just because he converted and everyone who converts is like the child of Abraham. But who is Abraham? Abraham did the same exact thing. Abraham looked around at the world and he said, everyone's worshiping idols. That's not true. Did he have Judaism yet? Did God speak to him yet? He had nothing. He destroyed his father's idols. He spoke out against paganism. What did he have? He didn't have any other option. There wasn't another path that he had yet, but he just knew that this wasn't true. And according to some, we have text 13, text 14a, text 14b, all these wonderful texts that we're not going to read inside. It talks about how Abraham turns his back on polytheism, on paganism, either at the age of 3, or the age of 40, or the age of 48. God only speaks to him at the age of 75. If God had spoken to him and then he abandoned the other path, you would say he switched from one path to another that also comes with its comforts. But he never left to be more comfortable. He left single-mindedly. He left without care that it was going to hurt him. He left when there was no comfort, when there was no support system for what he was believing in. I mean, there was a little bit. There were some other monotheists, but he didn't know of them at the time that he decides to go against paganism. So what's the point? Abraham blazes the trail of that single-minded... Abraham is the first to turn his back on falsehood because it's false, even to his own detriment. Following in his path is Yaakov, who's dedicated to truth, even at his own detriment. Opposite of that is Esav, who's dedicated to evil and even his own detriment. And that leads directly to Amalek, who's dedicated to evil, even to his own detriment. And on the other side, Yitro, Jacob, Abraham. Are you with me on this? Or Abraham, Jacob, Yitro. Those three are connected. And Amalek and Esau and Amalek are connected. Two sides. Now we understand the rest of the story. So what happens? Yitro has already abandoned idolatry. He's already handed in his idols. He's already faced the consequences of his actions. It was never about feeling more comfortable. It was always about a pursuit of truth. So what happens? He's already found what he's at to find. He's already made that dedication. But on a cosmic level, there's still a battle between Jacob and Esau. And as was told, I'll read this text. We'll do one more text. As was told to their mother, Rebecca, one stands opposite the other, and when one rises, one falls. Take a look at 16a and 16b, page 79. And God said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. God said to Rebecca, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 kingdoms will separate from your innards, and one kingdom will become mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. And according to Rashi, 16b, on page 79, once again, they will never be equal in greatness. When one rises, the other will fall. The way it works is like a seesaw. If Esav has the upper hand, Yaakov has the lower hand. Lower hand? Is that how you say it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if, conversely, if Yaakov has the upper hand, Esav has the lower hand. The same thing is true with Amalek and Yitro. So when Amalek falls, are you with me? When Amalek falls, immediately after, Yitro rises. It's at the last story of the last week's Torah portion, yeah? Is the fall of Amalek. Right. The rise and fall. Amalek challenges, and they're defeated. Immediately after that, Vayishma Yitro koim midjan chotei Moshe. Immediately afterwards, our Torah portion begins. And Yitro, the fall of Moses, hears what happened. And what did he hear? We had before. What did he hear? The war against Amalek. He heard that Amalek fell. And once he heard that evil has fallen, that irrational evil has fallen, then his irrational truth can rise. And at that point he says, I'm going to make it official. I'll join officially the Jewish people. Again, on a cosmic level, but that's Esau what he...
is not good.
Say it again?
Esau is not good?
Esau is not good, no.
So it's,
Depends who
it,
you
I
ask.
mean, that, those two paragraphs are not, doesn't really signify, represent that. It just
Which
means
two paragraphs?
It could
16A
have
and
been good, it
16B.
chose not to be.
No, what it represents is 16b. They will never be equal in greatness. When one rises, the other will fall. Sometimes the force of Esau is greater, and the force of
Bad.
Jacob, the force of evil is dominant, and the force of goodness is low level. And then when that falls, the other one rises. And so therefore, it took Amalek to fall in order for Yitro to rise. Again, they represent diametric opposites on this cosmic balance scale. One is an irrational dedication to evil, and the other is an irrational dedication to goodness and truth. When one rises, one falls, or conversely, when one falls, the other has the opportunity to rise.
But the goal
So
is for the Jacob side to rise.
right. So when Amalek falls, then the one who irrationally chose truth can rise, and that is Yitro. And now we understand why Balaam, decades later, 40 years later, looks at Amalek, and then he immediately looks at the descendants of Yitro. And he says, Amalek, your end is destruction. Evil will ultimately fall. In the long game, there are moments in which evil seems very strong, as we know, of course, in our lives, and history has proven time and again. But ultimately, in the end of days, evil will fall, and who will rise? Yitro, you chose well. Yitro, you're the bird that went on the right statue. Again, using that analogy, right? You chose the right path. When one falls, one rises. They're connected. Their fates are intertwined, because we're not just talking about Amalek and Yitro. We're talking about Jacob and Esau and Jacob, and their fates are intertwined. When one rises, one falls. It's not like both can rise or both can fall. It's almost like one or the other. So when Amalek falls, Yitro can rise. Yeah.
Edom is the west,
Yes. Edom is also the west. Edom is
and
Rome.
we never really wiped Amalek out.
No. Amalek is still around. Now, hold on. Let me just finish off with the final point, and that is to make a full circle. And that is, why is the Torah portion called Yitro? Because what is Yitro? And now that we've explained everything, what is Yitro? It's the dedication to truth irrationally. What is the prerequisite for Torah? It's to be dedicated to a mitzvah, not because it feels good or because it makes us better. To study Torah not because it makes us wiser, but because it's truth. It's the right thing to do. And that's the ultimate reason, the anti-reason. It's not a reason, it's the ultimate source of dedication to Torah and mitzvot, is the single-minded dedication to truth, justice, and the Torah way. So, what's the bottom line?
That a rabbi only has to work when he's young. Because it says, Merav Yavot Se'uri.
What?
True. Yeah. No, it's a pun it's very an intricate pun.
It's a high-level pun.
High-level pun. What's the anti-pun? What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that the foundation, the essence of Torah, is a dedication to truth, even when it doesn't feel good. It's Yitro. It's if it's true, it's true.
And
Yeah, it's going to cost.
It's also you can change. The thing is.
Yeah, you can change. That's another theme, but that's another class. That's also true.
Yitro's thing is
Yeah.
he
Yes.
changed.
He changed. He went
He
from one
chose,
side to the
he
other.
chose.
He chose and he changed to the point that he was willing to do so, even to his own detriment, even when it wasn't comfortable. So you and I can ask ourselves the question: can we change? Can we choose? Yes, but also, are we ready, willing, and able to do a mitzvah, even when it's not comfortable, even when we don't feel like it, even when it's going to cost us something? That's the question. And if we can, then we're following the path of Abraham and Jacob and Yitro. So why is the Torah portion called Yitro, according to this? Because it means being dedicated no matter what. And that's the story. Thank you for joining me today for Torah Studies. Pleasure. Okay.
Still like that, no matter what.
I listen. I know. Many people have struggles.
Announcements?
Announcements, very important announcements. Let me just turn off the camera just to make sure we're good here with the stream. Okay, quick announcements.